Hello, I'm Elizabeth Macdonald here with Ruth Wood, and we are among the many of you who are saying we're not done yet. Welcome, Ruth. You were called to congregational ministry years ago, but then after you retired from Calvary United Church here in Kingston, God's call took you outside of the walls of the church in new and exciting directions. You were called to join the spiritual care team at Queen's University. What was that like?
Well, obviously it was quite different, and it helped to expand my sense personally of call. I was definitely aware of the fact that there were chaplains in all kinds of institutions that did ministerial work that was not traditionally what we think of as what a minister does, but and I had never really felt that when I was beginning my ministry that I was called to chaplaincy work. But on the other hand, at that point, I sensed, okay, yes, this would be something that fits with my sense of call. And so that changed as I went into it. And of course it was a whole different way of being a minister, in that your primary function is not to create a worship service every week. So so that was different.
And can you say a little bit about what it was like to work primarily with students on campus? People who were in the midst of quite significant transition, many of them. What was that ministry like, working with students?
So it's, again, because you're in a secular setting, you couldn't just, like, as a minister sitting in your office and somebody comes in and they need to talk to you, you go on the basis that you're in a Christian environment and you're talking to a fellow Christian, and they have some background that relates to religion. There's no assurance whatsoever that somebody coming into you in the chaplain's office, even though it's recognized as a religious institution, they're going to have any background, and or that they even want to hear anything from the point of view, from a theological point of view. So it meant that you often were using your theological understanding to frame what you were saying to them, but not necessarily framing it in a way that they would take as a theological input from you. So.
Well, what a challenge, theologically and pastorally as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
about a decade ago, I understand that you and your wife Anne and another couple who are parents of a trans child launched here in the city of Kingston, Trans Family Kingston. Can you tell us what's involved in that organization?
Okay. So Trans Family Kingston, yes, is a support group for all transgender people, non-binary people, and all of their family members. We recognized that there just, at that time in Kingston, there seemed to be no support for trans people, and certainly no support for their family members, because spouses, parents, children of trans people, they also need support in various ways, coming to accept this change in their life. And of course, I mean, we understand that the trans person is struggling to accept this change, but the people that are around them need some help too. So that's why we got together and started Trans Family Kingston. It's grown to huge numbers that, you know, I can remember thinking I'm probably the only trans person in Kingston. And
what have you discovered, Ruth?
Well, certainly there were a lot more than I ever suspected. Part of it is that once again, like when I was involved in starting Trans Family, I didn't think of it as a calling. It was something that I just saw the need for that support and figured, well, okay, I can jump in there and start giving that support and help other peoples to support one another, because that's what we do there. We're all looking after each other. But
So, go on.
sure, go ahead.
So how did your faith help and support you as you were helping and supporting those who were coming to Trans Family Kingston? What role did your faith play?
Well, it certainly gave. As I look back, I realized, okay, that was my faith that said, there's a need here. It's a need that you can fill, and so you should do that. And it's in a way, it's similar to chaplaincy work in that, again, lots of the people that I would be working with would have no faith background whatsoever. And also, and this was true on campus as well, there would be people that needed help, but who had been damaged or very badly mistreated by their faith community. So many of those people absolutely did not want to even have God mentioned in anything that I said. And so once again, it was a case of trying to find ways that I could help people that didn't seem to be in any way, shape, or form connected to God.
So challenging, to say the least, and yet it strikes me you were in a unique position and uniquely gifted and equipped to be present with those who were looking for support, who'd had a bad experience in the church or in their faith community. I mean, you know lots about faith communities, and I just see you as being uniquely gifted and positioned to do this work.
Well, I guess that's true. I mean, I'm certainly not the only trans minister. So, but at the time and the place, I was the one. So, yeah.
And at the same time, I would imagine that lots of folks, especially from the outside, looking at this community organization, this secular organization, they would look at what you're doing as a form of volunteerism. Oh yes, Ruth Wood volunteers at Trans Family Kingston.
Right.
And yet you and I are talking about how this was not simply volunteer work, that over time you did see this as call.
Yeah, and as I say, I certainly didn't see it as we started. I remember one person who was coming to the meetings who at one point said something to the words of, well, we're your flock now. And I remember thinking, no, this is not a religious organization. This isn't a call. This, but over the ensuing years, I came to see it as definitely a call. That what I was doing was something that was a call.
So I'm going to ask you to think way back to those days when you began to discern a call to congregational ministry, and just to invite you to compare these experiences of call. Was it similar or different when you were called to congregational ministry? Was that process fairly straightforward, or did it take time to evolve and for you to see a call to congregational ministry as called? How do you compare the two?
Well, you're familiar with the person named Jonah. So that gives you a clue. It took me quite a few years of having people suggesting that I had gifts for ministry, and in fact doing an outward call to say you should consider this, and me saying no, that's not for me. I don't think so. No, thank you. And so that went on for quite a few years before I finally sensed that was something I needed to look into and went through discernment. But by the time that I'd finished discernment, then I recognized I had a sense of call. I was ready to get going. And Transfamily Kingston would have been more or less the opposite, because right away I saw the need to be there with these people and to help them, and dived right in. But it took me, I'm going to say 5 years probably, before I realized that I actually had a sense that this too was a call. So,
Mm-hmm. So I think there is a notion, and it's a bit of a myth, that a call is singular, like a person gets one call at one point in their life, and it's, uh, there's many stories of the call being very dramatic. And yet, your own experience really challenges that notion of a single call in a single moment that is a blinding flash of light.
yes, yeah, it definitely was not that way for me, because I expanded my sense of call to go into chaplaincy, and really expanded it to be considering my work with not just the trans community, but the LGBTQ community. So yeah, for me at least, it was not a single call.
Yeah. So as you think, your experience of call over the years has been so rich and so complex, and I wonder what it's taught you about the nature of call.
So of course, as I alluded right at the beginning, it seems to be never ending, both in that you can't run away from it, but also that if you allow your mind to be open to call, you start to see it in other places and in other ways than perhaps what you originally thought of. And I think the biggest thing for me was recognizing that call is I would describe is a sense, as compared to a knowing, or certainly as compared to something that you logically come to the conclusion that, yes, I'm called to ministry. I've got speaking skills, and I've got analytical skills, and I care for people, so therefore I'm called to ministry. It wasn't like that at all. It was a sense inside. I would probably use the word term, it's something that you know in your heart, rather than what you know in your head. So.
Mm-hmm. And in the United Church, there has been tremendous value on testing call. That there is that journey you've talked about, deeply personal, coming to that sense in your heart. And in terms of church ministry, there's also been a sense that needs to get tested with committees, with people in your community of faith, and then other levels of the church. When it came to Transfamily Kingston, there wasn't that external, kind of structured testing of call. So I just wonder what your experience of that has been. What's it been like to share your sense of call once you've known that in your heart? Early on, you had to go to committee meetings and prove you were called. More recently, it's been much less formal. So what's it been like to test and to share your call with other people?
Well, I don't think that anything I did changed as I became aware of it being a calling. So in other words, it wasn't that I all of a sudden did anything differently in the way that I helped people. That was already there. It was more a sense that, okay, you're still in ministry, Ruth. That's maybe the way that I would put it. That it wasn't that I'd retired from ministry. I was still in ministry. I was still I would certainly say, doing God's work. Even though I wasn't trying to convince anybody there that they needed to start coming to church, and obviously the fact that Trans Family Kingston is a very loosely structured group. There's no formality at all there, and so there's obviously no pay. so there was no committee that would ever look at what I was doing and saying, yes, you're fulfilling your call here. But there's a small group of people that help to run the place, and no one has ever said, oh, we think you're going about this wrong, Ruth. You need to not do this or not do that. So it's
well, and it's still what you're doing. The ministry you're engaged in is still very much community based in a circle of people.
right.
I want to pick up on a comment you made a few minutes ago. Your sense that call is never over. And I think in a world that often looks at older people, assuming their work is done, you're suggesting something different.
Right. Yes. And of course, that has a danger with it, is knowing when should you be saying no, if I could put it that way. There is the danger sometimes of overdoing what you're doing, and so you need to be questioning, is this a sense of call, or is this me saying, oh, I don't know what my self-worth is if I'm not doing this? And just as at the very beginning, when you're going through discernment, you're trying to sense whether or not you really do have a call. I think that part's never ending as well, so that you're not saying yes to something just because that's what you do, but you're saying yes because you do recognize it as a call. So.
Ruth, thank you so much. You have invited us into a wonderful reflection on the nature of call. Really appreciate you sharing with us today. Any final words you want to, any closing thought as we come to the end here?
Well, just thank you. I didn't thank you at the beginning for inviting me into this series. So thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of the other interviews that you do.
All the ways that we are not done yet. Still discerning call and figuring out who we are and where God is calling us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.